so we can start. I call to order the City of Newberg Budget Committee meeting. Of May 17th, 2023. Sue, will you please conduct a roll call?
Yes, Madam Chair. Tonight we have 3 excused absences: Greg Minahan, Lizelle Mathai, and Derek Carmen. Alex Nichols. Hey.
Alex is going to be running a few minutes late. He's been reported to be on his way from the airport.
Okay, thank you. Teddy Bora.
Here.
Steph St. Cyr.
Here.
Raquel Peregrino de Brito.
Here.
Judy Brown.
Here.
Lily Bazoo.
Here.
Bill Rosacker.
Here.
Molly Olson.
Here.
Peggy Kilberg.
Here.
Elise Yarnell Holloman. Mike McBride.
Here.
Robin Wheatley.
Robin will not be attending tonight. I told her she would probably be excused if the chairman was of the right mind.
Okay, thank you.
So since I received notice from him that she has informed that she will be, I think it's fine by me if her absence is excused. I don't have a problem with that. Okay, so I will now open the meeting for public comments. First, Sue, did we receive any public comments online?
No, we did not receive any written public comments for tonight or virtual registration. Just we have one in person.
Okay, so I now have one in-person public comment. Please, from Aubrey Nichols, please step forward.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. My name is Aubrey Nichols, and I'm here tonight to speak on behalf of the Newberg Downtown Coalition regarding the budgeting for future plans for the Butler Square property, or the property on the corner of First and Howard Street, colloquially called Butler Square. I am the executive director of the Newberg Downtown Coalition. We are a small nonprofit that supports economic development in the downtown core. I am asking you tonight to please support the budgeting for the construction of a public restroom on that property. As you may know, the NDC board is made up of business owners, local landowners, people invested in our community, and specifically in the downtown core. The NDC board unanimously supports the addition of a public restroom into our downtown area. In addition to our board members today, I met with Maureen Rogers, who is the owner of Chapters Books and Coffee. She sees a lot of foot traffic in town, and she sees a high amount of requests for the use of her restroom. She supports this as an effort to increase accessibility in our town for people walking about. Public restrooms improve walking culture, something that is vital to the economic health of downtown as it pertains to tourism and small business. Additionally, it would serve as a resource for families and for those who visit here. We at NDC and as small business owners would love to see that space maintained as a space for downtown events and as a peaceful green space that is close to City Hall in the heart of our town. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comment. Hearing no other comments, I will now close the public comment portion of the meeting. We now have 2 sets of minutes to approve. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve both sets of minutes as presented.
I second.
Any discussion? So hearing no discussion, I call for a vote with a yay or show all those in favor.
Yeah.
A. Oppose? Abstain? Okay, unanimously passed. I will now turn over to staff for presentation on budget. Katie.
Thank you, Chair. We are going to start on Fund 4, which is on page 103 in your budget. Actually, let me change my mind on that. Before we get started, I have a printout on everybody's desk here for Fund 14. So we had a minor change based on some information that came to us. Doug, do you want to come up and join me for a minute?
So Doug Rux, Community Development Director. So when you reviewed Fund 14, we were anticipating that we were going to spend the $395,000 as the loan for the Fairfield Inn this fiscal year. We learned early this week that that will not occur until probably mid-August. We would not have the funds budgeted. So what we did is we took the 395 that we were going to spend this year, added that to the beginning fund balance for 23-24, and then increased the expenditure in the line item for the Economic Development Revolving Loan Fund by $395,000. It did not change any of the contingency numbers or any others, just those two numbers changed in Fund 14.
Yep, so they just increased by that and on both sides. So we're going to include this in the proposed budget. And so we wanted to slip it in so that we don't have to do a supplemental budget in July to make those funds available for the hotel. Does anybody have any questions or concerns on this change?
Which page is this?
Oh, it's on your handout.
But the
Oh, I
original
see
one,
what you're asking. It would be 68.
thank you for clarifying that.
Excellent. All right, if no questions on that, we will move on to the presentation of the capital projects. So we'll start with Fund 4.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Wilson. I'm the Assistant City Engineer, and I'm going to be presenting to you Fund 4 and later Fund 18. So Fund 4 and Fund 18 are for our capital projects. So what I want to do now is talk about both funds because they both have to do with capital projects. I'm going to talk about them in a general sense. So our capital improvement projects are mainly outlined by the master plans that we have: water, wastewater, stormwater, and transportation master plans. We use forecasting data for our population on a 10-year horizon, which is provided by PSU, and compare our future infrastructure needs to our present infrastructure condition. The types of projects that come from the analysis of the difference between those two are safety improvements, mobility improvements, and the expansion and level of service for future growth. So when developing the CIP list that was presented to council earlier in March, these two budgets reflect those projects. Each fiscal year, we look at the notes and reviews that we've gotten throughout the year from maintenance about more prevalent needs that maybe weren't captured in these master plans. We look at our forecasted budget for the next 10 years or longer, and that's how we come up with our 5-year budget. And then we line up our priority projects that are on a mandated deadline, like the House Bill 2001 projects and the groundwater treatment plant. And then we look at our immediate needs that may have come from a infrastructure failure because of a weather event or something got old. Then we bolster our ongoing programs, which are aimed at keeping those failures from happening in the first place, like our seismic resilience replacement for pipes, and the I&I program, which is inflow and infiltration, which is keeping errant water out of our sewer system, and then the pavement maintenance program. So in the CIP budgets, you'll see a mix of these projects, programs, and immediate needs. A quick blurb about the multi-year projects and saving up for projects. If I have a future project that'll cost, for an example, $3 million. Instead of doing no work until we have that money or postponing programmatic maintenance work to afford large projects, we add money to the budget for that project each year until we have the money to start either design or construction. So that's why you'll see projects, the budget might be increasing incrementally each year. Okay. There you go. That's the overview for why they're structured the way they are. And so for Fund 4, this particular fund covers the wastewater, water, and stormwater capital projects. In March, we came to council with the CIP list, which was approved at that time. But if you guys have specific questions on the projects that are listed here, I would love to answer them. One change to note is that the Otis Springs project is no longer going forward and has been put on the shelf until a future date.
Why? I do see here, for the Butler property, a $75,000 allocation.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, quickly, why was Otis not going forward? I missed it.
We decided that it wasn't where we wanted to spend the money on the infrastructure and that it could wait until a later date.
So which one of these projects are carryover that we weren't able to do in 22, 23, and then carried over to the next fiscal year? Because I'm looking at the programmable logic controller. I'm guessing that one we didn't do it in 22, 23, and we're gonna carry it over for next fiscal year.
Yeah, a bulk of their progress, I think they're about at 60% completion, and so the bulk of their progress is still coming.
Madam Chair. That was a very fiddly one and it is nearing completion though. So we hope to have it finished soon.
And it's still gonna cost $1.1 million for next fiscal year.
Yeah, it's incredibly expensive.
Okay.
And is that sufficient for you to complete that project, that $1,100 million, 100,000?
So that project, actually, the equipment purchase will happen after after July 1, which is the biggest bulk of the money associated with that. And we did get a Yamhill County ARPA grant to cover 500,000 of that. So that's reflected in the budget also. So. Thanks.
Thank you.
Apologize, Teddy. I missed the first part. Which one are you referring to?
I'm talking about all the projects, so the CIP projects that we planned on this fiscal year, which ones are carrying over to the next fiscal year that we didn't finish? And I was asking specifically on the $1 million one, the programmable logic controller, where we budgeted $1 million and then it's another $1.1 million for the next fiscal year.
So are you on, what page are you on? Is that the,
103.
okay, sorry.
Line.
Okay, thank you.
The line is that he's mentioning is
There it
ending 706397.
Thank you.
Just for, so all the projects that you guys are planned, you guys were, or have planned for maintenance and everything for the Fund 4, do you have confidence that you were able to appropriately budget for them to complete them or to do the work that is allocated for this year with the presented numbers? Okay.
Yes. We we do build in a contingency for those, and our goal is definitely to stay within that.
I just want to make sure that you guys have enough funds for you to complete what you plan to complete to keep this going. Thank you.
Oh, I had left it on, I'm sorry. So this Fund 4 is proprietary capital projects. It's not capital improvement projects. Is that right? They're distinct?
Yes, so the proprietary funds are our business type funds, so that's the water, wastewater, stormwater. So they're just a different type of fund, that's why we have to call it the proprietary one. So like, we have another capital project that's for the street separately. And then we have another capital project that's for the governmental other revenue.
So some of these really are the CIPs.
Yes.
Okay, I thought, okay, thank you. It makes more sense.
Yeah.
No further questions? Then move along.
Awesome, all right. So going back. to Fund 18. Fund 18 is all of our street capital projects, which come from mainly the TUF fund.
That's page 81. Yeah, and again, just to go back to your question, the street capital projects have to be separated because it's street revenue, which is not a proprietary fund. It's a restricted special revenue fund. So it has to be kept in a separate fund from the other capital projects.
We also get money from our gas tax to pay for pieces of our projects in this fund as well. So it's set up the same way, but do you guys have any questions on specific projects?
I do, for bicycle route and 88 improvements, can you talk a little bit about, where, I mean, how much $40,000 is going to increase the bike route of Newberg? Oh, go on, Mr. Worthy.
Thank you. This is one of the ones where we cut the number from last year because our own staff are going to be doing the ramps and cement work. So in a few places throughout the budget, you may have seen some numbers surprisingly drop. That's because we're going to try, so it's kind of a test bed, right? See if our folks can do this work. So we're only paying for the materials, for the cement or the rebar, and hoping to use new talented staff to do it in-house.
And this $40,000 is the portion of this project which we think will be SDC eligible.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, it's on page 81 and it's the first line under the expenses 18-5150-702106. And it's the $40,000.
Another question for Elliott Road. We have the budget amount of $1,738,897. Is that going to take you to the finish line of that project, or is it for also an allocated work for this year calendar?
It is allocated for this year because it's what we have proposed 2023-24, but it's also just for the streets portion of that project. And so
Okay.
you'll see Elliott Road in Fund 18 as well.
Okay. So is this one of those examples where you allocated some funds for the work that is scheduled for this budget year? And then you estimate that for the rest of the work, there will be more funds allocated in the next budget. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay,
And so another example is the one, the next number below it, you'll see $5,500 for the College Street bike lane and sidewalk. At the time that we made this budget, when I was talking with the project manager, we weren't sure if they were actually going to finish in this fiscal year.
Right.
Because the budget was still kind of close, so we left what we believe the work that they would have left for next year.
Okay.
Next fiscal year, after August.
Okay, thank you so much.
And I do want to highlight on the revenues, the federal exchange grant. So that is where we have some of our gas tax revenue that we exchange to be able to use it for a different purpose that's still related to the street fund. So some of it is not always a dollar for dollar exchange, which I will talk about on the debt service fund, because we also do that for our bypass loan that we pay for. So when we use it for projects like this, I believe it's a 94 to 100 ratio. So for every dollar we spend, we get to exchange 94 cents, basically. So it's not quite an even exchange, but it allows us more flexibility for the gas tax revenue.
Further questions, anyone?
The SDC, transfer in street SDC, several $1 million. What are those? How can I see on the budget where that money is spent, the SDC money specifically?
That would. Yeah, I think that would be in the specific project budget.
Correct. The SDCs, how they relate to each one of these projects is not shown in the budget. We have that information available that we can provide, but it's not actually shown in the budget document as it says.
Yeah, each of these,
It is, off the top of my head, it's gonna be Elliott Road and it's gonna be the Main Street, Illinois 240 intersection improvements. And then the bike route and ADA.
and some of them are also a percentage where you can do like 25% SDC or 50% SDC. But we can provide you those breakdown on the projects.
Okay, just for instance, with the Elliott Road project, how does some of that classified as new construction, which would make it SDC eligible? Right?
We're providing additional capacity by adding the bike lanes and the sidewalks.
Regarding the Main Street, Illinois intersection, it's so over the 2 years, it's about $680,000 allocated to that project. Is that for evaluating the intersection, or is some of that money put toward doing some work on that as well?
Currently, oh, that's a good question. I know that we've set it up so that we can cover design for that project. Do you know more specifics?
No, it's first for design and feasibility and public involvement. The other piece we should realize with some of these projects is that sometimes we carry more money in both years. We don't intend to spend it, but we never know for sure when we're doing the budget in January, where we're gonna land July 1. So sometimes we have a little bit more money in both years, just so we make sure that we're covered in case.
So
It's a very
just,
complicated intersection. I recognize that.
so just so that we're clear, the 215,000 that was budgeted last year, plus the 467,500 that is budgeted this year, it's really to study how to resolve. It's really not, none of these dollars are going to be spent on actual work, correct?
That, I'm gonna say that that's true, but it would depend on how we were. How the project manager and I decided to set up the budget. If we knew that we were gonna be, if we had it in our funds to start saving up for construction sooner, then we would try and do that. While we were in the design portion of it. For this particular project, I believe that we are just doing the design out of this money that's put here.
Thank you.
Did you want to say something else?
So this is actually a really cool point that we've reached in this meeting right now, because there's a thing that some cities are doing, but it's kind of hard to do initially, which is some cities have gone to what's called a 2-year budget cycle. And the reason why some cities have done this is because a lot of the projects that we know cannot fit inside a 12-month span can be fitted inside an 18 to 20-month span. So the cities that have managed this feat of this brain exploding thing of changing it to be 2-year cycles, what they're doing is in the lead up to the beginning of a 2-year budget cycle, they do all the prep work to begin before the engineering studies begin. And then just as the cycle begins, they roll into the studies and then construction, and the project is finished or almost completely finished before the end of a 2-year cycle. And that is an aspirational thing that the city might be able to get to one day, I hope.
Sounds good. More questions on this Fund 18? Hearing none, moving forward.
All right, we'll move on to the SDC funds. And those are on page 105.
Good evening, Karen Hoffman, city engineer, here to talk about the SDC funds. And system development charges are charges that are charged one time to developers. And they are strictly can be used for projects to increase capacity of the system. So whether that's water, wastewater, stormwater, or streets. As the mayor noted with Elliott Road, we were expanding capacity of that road by adding in bike lanes and sidewalks. And there is capital project lists that can be that dictate what projects can be used or that SDCs can be used on. So with that, a couple things also to note is that the dollar amounts that are estimated for next fiscal year were based on rates previous to the increases that happened in April by the council. They're an estimate, just as Doug noted with the building permit fees and the planning permit fees. They're based on what we think development's going to occur in the next year. And estimating when they might pull those permits, because most of the SDCs are paid at building permit stage. And as we look at the next 5 years, we're looking at less single family residences right now and more multifamily, which increases some of those SDCs. But they also may be the dollar amounts that are shown in the budget may need to be lowered depending on what the council does as part of the SDC subcommittee as we move forward. So that would require a supplemental budget if we get to that point. With that, like I said, the numbers are based on what developments we think are going to happen. Some assumptions based on the sizes and those types of things. And then that's where that number comes from in those budgets. And then the transfers out cover, again, those projects that we talked about that are SDC eligible and get transferred back into funds 4 and Fund 18. Any questions? And those are funds 42, 43, 46, 47, and 47.
I got a question. So on the SDC fees, there's no change from last fiscal year to this fiscal year. From what Doug said, that the construction's gonna slow down quite a bit. So shouldn't that be less than what we had for last fiscal year?
So there's a couple of things that affected is the type of construction. Again, single family residences have gone down, but some of the multifamily have gone up. So that kind of offsets what those fees end up to be. And then it's also a determination of where, again, when those building permits will hit. So the building permits hit at a different stage than the planning permits hit. So it's kind of an offset. And again, it is just an estimate at this stage of the game. And again, we do guesstimate where, when we did this in January, which ones would be writing or giving the SDCs this fiscal year versus next fiscal year. And we try to balance that a little bit.
For the estimate for last year, are you getting close to the 3 million estimate?
We're getting close.
Do you have a question?
I wouldn't have noticed that. So all of them are exactly the same except for water. Why is that one down? Looks like 250,000.
The water, it tends to always come in lower than what we estimate, and I know Katie and I have looked at it for years going, why is that? So I just arbitrarily lowered it. It's true,
This
you
is,
know,
you implied, you used the swag methodology.
I did.
Excellent.
One thing, when you started, you said that developers pay SDCs. And developers, as I understand it, do put in a lot of infrastructure out of their own pocket. Excuse me, SDCs are actually paid by the builders later on. Is that right?
The SDCs are paid on the building permit, so yes, it would be at that distinction between the builder and or the developer. Again, depends on what kind of project they're building.
Do you do a supplemental budget as you get into the year to true up things? Is that part of what you do?
Yeah, usually I do 2 a year. So I try and do a January and a June one. Yeah.
Any further questions? Carry on.
All right. Let's see, we will move on to the miscellaneous funds. And the first one on here is TLT, which is on page 113. And Will, did you want to speak on TLT?
So TLT, as many folks will know if they've been through the cycle before, is our transient lodging tax line items. And we currently collect 9% transient lodging tax on hotel stays and other overnight accommodations. The operators can keep 5% of the taxable rent to cover the cost of collecting these fees in the first place. So that helps them with their administration. The remainder of that money is split 64.933 to the city general fund and 35.067 to the purposes of tourism promotion. And part of that is there's a smaller section of $45,000 per year from the tourism promotion portion that goes to the Chamber Visitor Centre, with the rest of the portion going to Taste Newberg, who is our designated tourism economy bolstering organization. So that's kind of the overview of what TLT is. And now to move on to the numbers that are represented on page 113. Just to be clear, we actually are starting to feel pretty confident that these TLT revenue numbers are fairly understated. We've taken a very conservative position on these numbers, but the tourism economy is going really strongly right now. So don't be surprised if in a future supplemental budget, you see this stuff adjusted in an upwards direction on the income side. We've been reassured that the Allison Hotel is now fully operational and fully staffed. We know that in the distant future, once the debt mechanism has been dealt with, there will be another hotel. Now that won't affect this budget cycle in that sense, but you're going to see more revenue than is represented here. So that's kind of a summary of where we're at.
Excellent.
I have a question. Do we take in any funds from Airbnb or VRBO? Thank you.
We certainly do. And we go to great lengths to catch them.
Yes.
Come to my neighborhood.
Good to know.
My name.
As the revenues increase beyond the projection right now, is the intention to move these into the general fund over time or to put them into a reserve for future potential tourism developments?
So actually, based upon the legal framework, we don't get to renegotiate the percentages. In fact, if we tried to do so, it would have a negative effect because we would have to default to the state general number, which isn't as good for the city. So both portions will rise together. And, you know, as long as Taste keeps working hard and people keep visiting the city, it's one of the few really good general revenue sources that we have that doesn't have many complications.
So just to clarify, so out of the $1,071,000 dollars, the city gets to keep 694 that transfers out to other funds to the general that we can use as
Correct.
we please, and the other, the 45,000 goes to the chamber and 330,500 goes to visiting.
Correct. So the part that is volatile, so to speak, is the non-45,000 portion. It goes up and down depending on how well Taste is doing and how well we're doing, but it's rising nicely. And what I really should do in a future budget year is bring my giant transfers chart that I had made, because it's kind of mind-boggling. So I had a chart made, it shows all the transfers, how the funds feed each other. So I'm going to bring that next time.
More questions on this fund? Oh,
I think this is related to what Judy asked, the 70,000 transient lodging tax other, is that Airbnbs, VRBOs?
Yes.
And it's looks like we're anticipating a little more than previously.
Non-traditional heads and beds.
They keep popping up, so
and you
We'll
guys
take it.
track that through the licenses that or permits
Yes.
that you give to the homeowner? who-
yes.
And from some diligent detective work done by Barb as she
Yes.
looks for.
So I just have a question on that. How do we track it, or how do we collect it? Is it like an honor system? Because once a Airbnb pays their license, I mean, they could have a bunch of people come along. How would we know who's coming along, and how do we know how to collect the amount of tax we're supposed to?
We usually send them an invoice and then they have to tell us so it's since some point it is a honor system. Because they have to tell us their revenues and their share of paying the TLT tax.
But with that said, one of the functions that Taste does not advertise about itself is it also does a pretty good job of monitoring the local tourism economy. And we've had many instances where I've received an email from Lee saying, "Oh, are you aware that there's a new bed and breakfast happening here? Just wanted to let you know," to check up on that. So there is some mechanisms that are a little bit beyond the honor system.
But if I were to have Airbnb or VRBO or whatever in my home, when there's no oversight over if I rented that room for 30 days or 24 days or 7 days, it would fall on me to say, hey, City of Newberg, I rented for 30 days, here is this share, or there is
Yeah.
no way that we can control that.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you.
But we're getting a lot of money just off of honesty, I guess. You know,
Yeah,
so that's kind of impressive.
I mean, a lot of the money, a large portion is Allison money, of course, and they always behave with extreme integrity. So
well, for larger institutions, some of them have audits for what they pay for the TLT, the hotel motel tax.
And I would think that I would have to also report that income to IRS and
Right.
have to declare that I pay taxes on it. So I think, yeah, it's honor and I'm thankful for that, but there's also you always pay taxes. So
Is this practice in all cities? So Sherwood or Portland, it's all in the honor system.
It's one thing I've learned just from being on the Taste Newberg board ex officio. When there's a manager of your VRBO or Airbnb, they automatically do this. So I can't remember her name or the name of her business, but there's a woman who's doing this in McMinnville, Dundee, and Newberg. And so it's her standard practice to report this stuff. So when you get to that level, that makes it a little more of a sure thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or
my
quite a bit more.
understanding is that there are a couple of businesses in town that do that management, they do the cleaning and whatnot, and they would be the ones paying those fees, and the homeowner gets a portion of that total revenue. But, okay, any more questions on this?
Right here. So the citizen speaker earlier that's talking about the bathroom, would that come from this fund?
So interestingly, that's an interesting thing that you've brought up. Some cities have used, I hope you're not listening right now, Lee, because I'm not suggesting this. Some cities have used TLT revenue to build bathrooms. That has happened. It has been recognized as a potentially eligible use. However, in this case, we have some money put aside to look at the bathroom issue, but it's not coming out of TLT. So
So my
It's in
under-
Fund 4.
Yeah, that fund for that $75,000, is that to look at the bathroom or is it to actually build a bathroom?
So there's two, there's one in 75,000 in the wastewater project and 75,000 in the water. And that 150,000 should build the bathroom. And we're hoping to use some SDC funds for that.
we reckon there's enough in there to make a very basic stainless steel, not fancy, can't sleep in it type of toilet. Yes.
Okay, and maintenance of that, will it fall under whom?
It would fall under the valiant and hardworking men who work for Preston. But it will be brushed nickel or stainless steel, and it will be hosable and will create only a minimal amount of extra work for his lads.
Okay, so the city will be the owner of the bathroom and its maintenance. Okay, thank you.
And the hardworking lasses that work for Preston will not be excluded from using the hose.
Is there, is there a reason why it needs to be a cheap restroom? And I'm just saying that because it's one thing to have that in a beach setting, but it's another thing to have it in wine country that's up and coming, potentially, just wondering.
I would love to take that. Okay, so the reason why it should be very utilitarian is because if it gets vandalized, it will be more subject to vandalization and damage and will quickly become an eyesore. And we'd rather have something that is modern, but inexpensive. And it will have the model, one of the models we've looked at, you can Google this, is the Portland Loo Company, has a stainless steel model. And it doesn't look ugly, but it's robust and it's very cleanable and it's super hard to vandalize.
I've taken students to New York and there are no bathrooms, zero in public bathrooms. So thank you for the one or two that we're going to have.
It's one, right? Or two, just one. Okay. Any more questions on this? No, move along.
All
So
right.
you notice manure and bathrooms are both hot
I
topics.
know, people, I mean, we like to
Yeah.
talk about, okay, move along.
Yeah, pickleball. Okay, we'll move on to the debt service fund on page 115. So the debt service fund pays for 3 of our debts. So it pays for the PERS bond, the bypass loan, and the public safety communication upgrade. And we pay for the bypass loan through that federal exchange grant that I mentioned earlier. So this is our gas tax dollars that we exchange to use it for a different purpose than what it's designed for, but still street related. And when you use it for paying for debt, it's a 1-to-1 ratio. So you don't lose any of that money on this. So that is what we've designated for that. The pension bond, we charge, it's kind of an internal charge that we charge ourselves. It's a percentage of payroll just so that we can pay the debt associated with the cost of our pension bond. And that's where you'll see the pension bond charge up there in revenue. And the public safety communication upgrade is paid for by the general fund, so that is paid for by that transfer in.
I have a question. The transfer in general fund, 372, 575, last line here, 390001. So you're transferring in from the general fund to support the debt service.
Yes, for the public safety communication upgrade for the
Got it.
principal and interest.
Got it. Thank you.
So how far does this get it down on this debt for the communications?
Who has that answer?
I was hoping you'd ask that. Okay, so I shouldn't be this excited about the budget. I mean, the city managers aren't supposed to be this excited about the budget. So this is actually very interesting because this is the line item which ideally is the first one we would liquidate in our attempt to get debt reduction to happen. So we should, if things map out the way I'm hoping that they're going to, we would want to try to get that retired a couple of years early, which would put it into the 25, 26 timeframe. That's what we would like, rather than having it happen in 5 years, which is what it would naturally happen. But I have no reason to believe that we have to wait that long, and things are looking positive. There's a lot of council meetings yet to happen on this discussion item, but that would be the first one on the chopping block if we're going to go for debt reduction. And then the second one would be the DEQ loan for the wastewater plant. That would take a lot longer, but that would be our second objective.
Any further questions on Fund 9? Move along.
All right. So the Governmental Capital Projects Fund. So this one is not related to a CIP. This one is just carryover money related to that communication upgrade that we did for the dispatch center. So we just have the projects complete. We just have one final payment that's just hanging out there and we're waiting to be invoiced. We thought it was going to come this year and it looks like they're probably not going to send it till next year. So that's why there's just a small fund balance hanging out in there until we can close out this fund with this project. And it's as simple as that. Any questions on that one? Okay,
Move along.
and I'll invite Corey up here for this one. Hi.
Madam Chair, Budget Committee. So the Library Gift and Memorial Grant Fund is where we do our library programming from. And these are all gifts and grants that are received. So this isn't city money that's coming in, it's outside money that's coming in. So and the amount that comes in can vary widely. The mainstays in this are the Library Foundation, which right now is funding all of our programming. And that's going to be a little lower this year due to how the stocks and bonds didn't do so well this last year. The Library Friends are not giving directly to us this year because they are actually paying $55,000 for the repairs in the Carnegie Library, and they're paying for that directly. And then our Ready to Read grant is a grant through the state of Oregon, and that pays for a lot of our children's programs that we have. It's just kind of the basics on our gift, grant, and memorials. Do I have any questions from anyone? Yes.
Where do the funds, does the Library Foundation get the funds to fund these grants?
So most of those are gifts that people leave for us when they pass away. So, and then those accrue, and then the library is given the mandatory 4% from what those funds are making. And that's how we get the funds from the foundation.
So who administers that foundation?
So the Library Foundation has a board, and the board is who administers the foundation. So there's several community members who are on that board. I think that we have
maybe 6 people on that board right now. So Greg Minahan is one of those people who isn't available tonight, but he is the current chair of that board, actually.
I have a question. So I remember last year, for this 15,000 that came from Library Friends, it was awarded, it was really specific for windows work. Were you guys able to complete that?
So it is in process. So that one will actually span 2 budget years. So what we ended up doing is just asking the friends to pay for all of that directly. So that the $15,000 is included in that $55,000. So we have the company, we have the estimate. Right now, we're waiting on the permits.
Great.
And then hopefully that will start. It might even start, it probably will start this summer. So probably July, which is going to be a little crazy at the library for the summer because that's our busiest time of year, but we're so excited to get it done.
But this is no longer in scope of the city to this project is no longer in the scope of the city to manage. The Library Friends are going to take complete control over that so that we are not. So the city is not involved.
So I would say the city is involved so Public Works is definitely been overseeing all of this. So that is how the city is involved in this. And then the funds for the restoration of our 111-year-old building, that is being paid for from the generous donation of our Library Friends.
Great. Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Awesome.
If there are no further questions.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to our final fund, the ARPA fund, Fund 99. Did you want to talk on that one too?
Sure. Why change of habits or lifetime, eh? Call me Mr. Ian was Mr. IT, I guess I'm Mr. ARPA. So the American Rescue Plan, as you undoubtedly know, was signed into law in March 11th of 21, and it allocated $1.9 trillion of COVID relief to be used in a variety of ways, and different cities did different things with it. Many cities, perhaps run by wiser people, put the money straight into 1 or 2 capital projects, and instead, looking at the language of the federal rule, we decided to try to do what was supposed to be done with it and have a process where all kinds of community groups could try to get some of the money. It was a lot of work and it still is. So we have, if you look at the budget numbers, we have got to about what I would call the halfway number. Now, there is some Kentucky windage in these numbers. Because, for example, since I gave a report to council recently, the Lutheran charity has moved forward faster again, and we have actually disbursed several $100,000 towards their project. So it may be that less will be spent on the budget year that is coming compared to what is actually typed here, because we've seen some more projects start to move forward again. But as you know, clearly, everything has to be well underway through 2024. We want to see things starting to wrap up. And so that's kind of the picture that we're at. So there is some estimation here on what activity will happen next year versus this year. It depends how quickly they move.
So you just wrap this into the supplemental budget as true up the numbers as we go.
Correct. Yep. Correct. We're not really. If I could go back and whisper in my own ear, maybe I would say this is a lot of work, Will. But I still think I did the right thing. I still think we did the right thing to try to give it to all different types of organizations, even though it's a harder road.
Question there? You have a question? Go ahead.
So the 1.5 million for the redundant water supply, you believe that will be spent in 23, 24?
We will make sure that all of those funds are spent before the deadline. There is purchases have to happen. There is engineering work that has to happen for the water plant. more money may end up in this line item for the water plant. We will make sure, even if we have to go to Sladen and bang on their office door and put the check in the guy's hand, we'll make sure we get that off the ledger in due course.
And for the 2,043,267, that is for the community projects. Let me see if I understood correctly. You will be tracking with them, with the recipients of these funds to make sure that they complete by the deadline.
Mhm.
What if they don't? Are we going to lose those funds?
That's
back
a great question. I suspect that what will happen is, first of all, for background, for everyone who hasn't lived this for these 2 years, there is a memorandum of understanding that says what each entity is supposed to do, and it lays out milestones. If those are not met, then there would end up being legal action at the end of the journey. I'm not going to say the name because I don't believe in doing public shaming, but there is one organization that has already been sent a lawyer's letter for non-compliance. So we're going to do our very best to make sure that everybody does what they say they would do.
Thank you.
Will, you also don't disperse the whole money up front. So if somebody has to cancel a project because it's just not working, then that part that you haven't dispersed yet is still in your hands and we can shove it into a project.
Correct. One of the things that made this kind of onerous is for each project, we had to have many meetings to scope what they said they would do and invent what the milestones would be in each MOU. And in many cases, there are projects where it was divided into phases, and as each phase happened, that would create a new disbursement. Now, there were some projects where all the disbursement was on the front end because it was a spend down type project. For those ones, we get payroll statements and such showing us the money being spent down. So.
Any further questions? Oh, yes.
So is there a place where all of those ARPA funds, like where each project is at? Like, how could we know what's happening with those?
So if you go to what council meeting was that? Was it May 1st? There was a presentation given. If you pull the footage from that meeting, that is mostly still true. Some projects have moved forward again since that point in time, but you can get the presentation and look at the video feed, and that explains where we were at.
I did also want to mention too, with the talks of the United States defaulting on their debt ceiling, one of the things that was mentioned on that was taking back COVID money, which would include ARPA funds. League of Oregon Cities has made a statement that they believe if you've designated the funds, that won't be retracted if that happens. So we should be fine in that instance, but if projects happen to change or whatever, we may have to move very quickly on that if something like that happens.
There are cities who have not yet designated what they're doing with their ARPA allocation, and that is foolish because those funds could be in jeopardy.
Further questions on the ARPA funds? Were these ARPA funds? Nope. Move forward.
All right, well, that is it for all of the funds. And I will turn it back over to the chair for our public hearing.
So this is about state shared revenues. I will now open the public hearing on the use of state revenue sharing. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to submit testimony concerning the possible uses of the state revenue sharing funds for fiscal year 2023-2024. Are there any declarations of interest? Hearing none, I will now turn it over to Katie for a staff presentation.
Thank you. And Sue, can you put up my state shared revenue?
Give me just a minute.
Sometimes we're faster than technology.
Katie, is this the big property tax slide? No.
No, it's the other one.
Okay.
It's where we could use a joke, Will. Yeah. Okay. So the ORS requires that we hold a public hearing to discuss the state shared revenues that we receive from the state. And just kind of briefly go over where those are at in the budget and kind of how we allocate them and what the requirements are for these. So these, majority of these, except for the last two, the gas tax and the 911 tax, are found in the general fund in the revenues on page 14 of the budget. So we receive two for the liquor tax, one that's known as the state revenue sharing, and then the other one is a liquor tax. And these are what the state taxes you when you purchase liquor, and then we get a per capita amount of that to us. And we're required to hold a public hearing to receive these funds. And then we also have to do a ordinance every year, which you'll see at the council meeting, that requires that we do at least 4 of the essential municipal services. So either fire protection, police protection, street construction, maintenance and lighting, sanitary sewers, storm sewers, planning, zoning, subdivision control, or 1 or more utility services in order to receive these funds. We also have the cigarette tax, which comes to us per capita to cities. We also have the marijuana tax, which is 10% of net state revenue sales. And then, of course, the gas tax, which is per capita to cities. And then the 911 tax is for those cities that have a dispatch center. And all of these require a yearly reporting that I have to do every July so that we can receive these revenues every year. Does anybody have any questions on these revenues? Okay.
So hearing no questions. So are there any comments or public testimonies on state revenue sharing?
No, I have not received any virtual or written public testimony, and I did not have anyone in the audience sign up for public testimony.
So hearing none, I will now close the public hearing on the use of state revenue sharing. So I will now ask if there are any recommendations from staff.
I recommend we approve the state shared revenue as proposed in the budget.
Any comments and discussions? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to approve the recommendation from to approve it as proposed in the budget.
Chair, I would like to recommend that we, or make a motion that we approve the use of the taxes as presented by Katie.
I second.
Any further discussions on this? Okay, so I ask you to vote for all in favor, raise your hand or say yay.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? So it is approved per recommendation unanimous. Excellent. So now we have 2 items that are pending in the agenda. I want to talk to you guys as a group to see what do you prefer to do first. So we have to approve the budget, and we also have to talk about the levy. So do you guys want to talk about the levy prior to approving the budget? Or do you guys want to approve the budget and then talk about the levy?
I would prefer to hear about the levy first.
All right, so I'm going to switcheroo here my order and say, I'm gonna turn it over to Katie for her to talk about the levy.
Thank you. And Sue, can we put up my PowerPoint, or not PowerPoint, just one page? Okay. So regarding the property tax levy, Newberg is kind of in a unique situation. So our maximum assessed rate that we can levy is $4.38 per $1,000. It just so happens we don't levy that amount because in November of 2017, we had a special election in the city and we split our fire services and TVF&R took over that to become its own taxing entity. And at that time, city council decided to lower our maximum assessed rate by the amount that TVF&R was going to separately levy, which was $1.88 per 1,000. So that brought our city's new tax rate down to $2.50 at that time. And they also included in the clause that we can increase the rate each year no more than 3% until the maximum assessed rate is reached again, which would be several years down the road before we're back at that. And that was kind of to give the taxpayers some relief so that they weren't hit very hard with a new taxing entity coming on the roll and give the taxpayers some time to adjust to the increase of taxes. So every year since then, it has been approved the 3% for to go back towards the maximum assessed rate. So if we were to do that, I kind of did some digging on this. So a house that's for sale now that's for 500,000 that has an assessed value of $247,728. They would see on their property tax statement a difference of $20.91 for the whole year if we increased it by 3% for this. The impact on the general fund, this gives us approximately $201,231 with this 3% additional property tax levy.
Is that money included in the budget?
It is,
Okay.
So you made the budget with this number in mind.
yes. However, if the committee does not want to approve it, we don't have to make any changes. It would just be a natural change that flows through where contingency would just be reduced.
And the number before, for the year before, was like right now, you said 2.8983. Do you
Yes.
have what the number was for the last budget?
No, last year it was,
Minus 3%. right?
yep, it was 2.8139.
Okay,
Does that include all the new construction that is going on right now?
So this is separate from that. So we have that estimate also included in the budget, but this is because we're not assessing the full amount of property taxes that we could be, which is what every other taxing district does. And for example, McMinnville just passed a levy similar to this, where they're separating their fire district from the city, but they did not lower their maximum assessed rate. So they kept their maximum assessed rate and then let the fire district come on at the $2 per 1,000 in addition.
And just one thing to bear in mind, and it's not a crisis or anything, but because of our COLAs and our inflationary pressure, as you already know, our ending fund balance did go down a little bit this year. And we are trying to keep our ending fund balances good with a view to future PERS increases that we know are coming. So from my perspective, I think that it would be reasonable to do this increase, which is actually far less than the rate of inflation that we've seen all year long.
any other question?
Well, the obvious question is Tualatin Valley raising their rate or are they fixed at 1.88?
No, that is their maximum assessed rate. Yes.
Okay, so if we don't have, anyone has further question, because I'm just gonna tell you how we will go. So we will go back to approve the budget. And then we'll come back and approve the levy. Is everybody okay with that? We have further questions. Go
Yeah.
on.
I'm not sure I understand it completely. So when it was reduced to 250 per thousand, how was that 1.8827 reduction determined? Was that what had been going into our city
Yes.
fire department?
Yes, so
Okay.
they did a whole analysis to see how much revenue they were putting into the fire department. And then when they made the split, that was the recommendation the city made for TVF&R to have as their maximum assessed tax value.
So since 2017, what has the city done in terms of property tax levy? Have they increased it 3% every year?
Yes, every year since this. Sue, did you want to comment on that?
So I was here when that occurred. It was not a council decision. They referred it to the voters. So it was in a charter amendment.
I mean, the decision was made by the voters, but most of them may not have understood that what this in effect did was made it so that Newberg's tax rate can be higher than a lot of other cities in the state, which would be fixed to the 4.38 per thousand. So just be aware of that.
I will say though, this was more unique because, like I said, McMinnville just went through the same situation where they didn't lower their rate at all and let their fire department come on with the $2. And that, I think McMinnville's justification on that was just because their city's deficit, that they felt they needed the extra revenue.
So there's, from a certain perspective, you would see that this deal, when it was done, was a fair deal for the residents. And also, we've done really well living within our means. And not everyone always recognizes that, so.
Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just have a question. I was wondering if I heard the word that we're gonna approve this. Are you saying that we are gonna be, there's a choice here? I'm sorry, I'm just asking for some clarification on that.
There is. So part of the budget committee's role is to approve the tax levy. So in most cases, it's just the maximum assessed rate. But in our case, we have a unique situation where in the charter, it says it can increase no more than 3% each year until the maximum assessed rate is reached.
So technically, what we could say is we want you to have $200,000 less in your budget.
Yes.
And we will not increase it. Or go with the proposal of this increase of 3% to 2.8983. And that will give an additional $200,000 basically to the general fund, right?
Yes.
So if we are living within our means, is there a need for this extra $200,000 because it's already been budgeted? Is that why we're increasing it? Or is it because, I mean, going to the grocery store is extremely, I mean, it's like everything's jumped. So it's like, if we don't need to add this to our residents, I don't know why we would, and I'm sorry, that's might be.
So, you know, we've been asked, you know, to function effectively and think like a business, right? We know that we have costs coming up that we're collecting revenue to be ready for, such as the hike in the PERS rate. This year, employees received between 4% and 7% COLA increases, which we had to do or we couldn't have hired any staff. We've got materials costs, which we've demonstrated really clearly to everybody, have gone up on a range from between 6 and as much as, in one case, 100 and something % for copper pipe. That's an outlier. So it just seems rational to not have the ending fund balance keep going down, because that eventually will cause some serious problems in later years. We have to keep up with our costs.
And I'm just thinking of people who are barely meeting their needs. So, I mean, totally. But at the same time, I think thinking of our residents who are struggling, and there's so many families who can't feed their kids. So I'm just like to throw that out there.
And again, when I did the average person, if you have a $500,000 home, it's roughly $21 a year of an increase.
That's fair. Just
Yeah.
$500,000 house for, but still, I'm just thinking.
Okay, so I really like that Will and all the staff, I think, have worked incredibly hard to stay within our means. Because I've been around other budgets that for a variety of different organizations that didn't work that way. But I kind of agree with you that it's not a lot of money, but at least it is a way for us to tell the community that we understand what you're going through, and we're just going to try and be a little more responsible with your tax dollars. And so we're not going to increase it to 3% this year. I'd like to just see us try and do that. Of course, I would certainly want Will or any staff person to, if it wasn't going to work out that way, to please speak up and let us know. But I think we should at least try and do this and just kind of hold the line and see how we do.
So I totally get that. I know that the people that you're concerned about don't have $500,000 houses, so maybe their rent will go up $5. But I'm afraid rents are not tied to property tax right now. They're tied to the scarcity. So I actually don't think this will impact the people who are really desperately in need. What does happen though, and we have to think past 1 year, the 3% that you do, which turns out to be like 7 cents or something like that. We say 3%, and I'm thinking, ooh, 5, we could do a lot. No, it's like 7 cents on 1,000. That goes in place, and now it's in place not just for next year, but all the years beyond. And the concern I think staff has is that we have some nasty big stuff coming at us, which they are trying to plan for. And I'm not talking about the water plant. Those of you who have been on council know about the pension issues and things which could really crater our budget. So building our revenue every year very slowly so it doesn't hurt residents, but growing it so that we can deal with this, I think that's fiscally responsible. So we always have to aim cutting service or in order to cut taxes. We're talking about cutting SDCs, which will mean we have to cut the projects that we do, but maybe that's the right thing to do. I think in this case, the trouble is, it's not just next year that you're trying it. You've lost that chance now carrying on. It's like a step and you didn't take the step. So for me, it doesn't appear to hurt, and maybe I'm wrong, but it's very small. So it doesn't appear to hurt those really in need. And over time, it will help us not go into a deficit situation. I'm actually quite worried about the PERS thing. It's a runaway nightmare. So.
Molly just said more eloquently precisely what I was going to say.
But I also hear you all saying, oh, sorry. I also hear you all saying that there are ways that our community is going to be increasing in revenue. So with the visitor tax or whatever on some of these other things, are there ways that we could bolster things instead of I don't know. I understand what you're saying. It's just, I think what is adding up for our residents, and that there's always something more. So you're going to pay more for sewer, you're going to pay more, all of these different things just start adding up and you feel like it's not very hopeful. So whatever that's worth.
I agree with you that there's always like an increase, and with inflation, and you go to the store and milk and all of that. I mean, eggs, right? So, but I also like to piggyback on the idea that this was something that was voted on, that, the citizens voted on having this 3% increase up to 3% increase a year. And if we want to split in the middle, we can talk about, well, this year, we're not going to do 3, we're going to do 2.5, or we're going to do 1 or 1. We can talk about what that would look like to meet in the middle. But we will be missing out on the opportunity from 10 years to be where we are projecting that we are going to need to be to catch up with all these other things. We're gonna be that much behind, whether it's 3% or 1%. So a $20 a year, or maybe 15 for someone with a lower income, lower house, or maybe a little higher. So I think it's a very small chunk of the apple. That translates well. I always use analogies. Anyhow, so Peggy,
Yeah, I was going to say my default position is always no new tax. But I was running the number, I think it's 8.5 cents per thousand that the 3% increase represents. And then when you put it in language like $20 a year, and that gets us farther along, as people have mentioned. So I think I support it in this case. And then when we get to that max, we don't even have to we don't have to have this discussion anymore. Hopefully we'll be a little ahead of inflation. So I'm going to move out of my default position and support this.
And I think too, when I did the math last year, I think it's gonna take us about 15 years to get to our maximum assessed rate, which was to ease the taxpayers back into what we used to be paying.
The charter amendment was for
The chart,
20
yeah.
20 years.
But, I mean,
20 years.
that's not accurate. What we used to be paying was 4.38. We're increasing over that amount over time, up to a new maximum, which is 1.88 mils over that.
Yes.
So, I mean, we're actually increasing. It does stop at some point, and that, caution staff, at some point, this discussion becomes moot because we don't raise every year by this amount. But I'm looking back at the property tax amount. We're proposing in a $6.5 million. Is that correct? So we're only talking about 3% of that number, which is like under $200,000.
Yes,
Increase
yes,
every year on our
201,000. Yeah.
So I guess I now understand why one of my constituents brings this up on a fairly regular basis. Staff is well aware of that person's point of view. I didn't understand it until now with this discussion, because I lived outside of the city limits when that levy was changed. So it is a very real issue. We are raising taxes. We're raising them by $200,000 a year. And at some point, we're gonna have to stop doing that. So, my question to staff is, this person hasn't kicked in yet. We're looking in the future of some really big financial stress on the entire state, including the city of Newberg. So maybe it is wise to, put a pause on this at some point. I'm not sure that this is the year. I wasn't involved in the discussions. I would not probably be a proponent of this year, but maybe this is discussion that we should have during the next year to see if we do. Thank you. Well,
I would, with all due respect, I would suggest that there's a different way of looking at this, which is that if we can successfully sharpen our pencil on being frugal about which CIP projects we do, and if we can be careful to try to eliminate our debt early, those will have the effect of having larger ending fund balances. And when we start to see larger ending fund balances, we will know that that's a more secure year to look at this issue of not doing an increase. That would be my suggestion, would be to tackle it from the cost side. Think about that. We've got things in the works that we're looking at, and we're certainly going to have a really good hard look at the whole CIP list, as you know we will this year.
I think that I'm so sorry to continue this, but I think like we just gave $150,000, and I know we wanted to do that. I wasn't a part of obviously those decisions, but we very easily gave that away. I just am not clear on why. I mean, I have two I have 2 homes.
Can you clarify the $150,000 that we gave away? Can you clarify what that is? Cause I think we were like, what?
The officer? Oh, I was thinking of the school resource officer. Yeah, and whatever, however, I mean, there's money, right?
That's constrained. It has to be spent in a certain way.
Yep.
So whether we spent it or the school spent it.
I mean, I have an interest in schools, obviously 3 kids in school, but it just seems like we get the extra $200,000 and it can go towards this fund, but it also feels like we do spend how we need to spend. And so I don't know. I just feel like that's something to think about or to talk about. I don't know if this is it, but I just feel like the constraints on families it's just getting harder and harder. And it's like, yes, it's only $20, maybe $40. I don't know. Maybe down the road when we're not having a 15% PG&E increase, all of these different things that are coming our way. I don't know. It just seems like we need to be thinking about people who are on the margins too. So. And then I would rather pay maybe $100, down the road. I don't know. I'm just.
I think we have a question over there, but I think we need to move on to the budget and then come back to the levy if we have more discussion.
So I think there's a strong interest. I know one of council goals is to have a long-term fiscal plan for being stable. Because there are so many things kind of changing, coming at us, including the economy, making life kind of more challenging for all of us. So at the appropriate time, and it would be great to invite budget committee to that council work session, talk about, because I know you two are working on how do we position ourselves so that when the PERS thing hit, we don't go into default. So sharing some of those ideas about how we keep from, I'm worried about lowering STCs and having water rates go up. So all of these things where we're all thinking about the people, we have to take care of them. I think there's a couple of people who are working very strongly to make sure we have options that don't hurt the public. So that it would be nice to have that discussion and invite budget committee to it if we could.
Totally. I mean, the thing is that coming off the back of a year when the city's electricity bills are also that much higher, the cost of living for city staff is also that much higher. And many city staff don't make anything like a fortune and they're in entry-level positions. They're young people, right? We have to balance all this out. And my argument would be, yes, of course, I feel for the people that are struggling. I know they're struggling. They're my neighbors. They're my friends. But if we don't do the small increments over time, we won't be positioned for when the big impacts arrive. And that's something we just have to think about.
Okay, so I think I'd like us to move back to the budget and have a discussion. I'll entertain a motion to approve the budget and as amended or so. You'd have to say that, and then we can go back to the levy. So
I move that we approve the budget as amended for 2023-24.
A second.
any discussions? Okay, so please raise your hand if you approve, if you agree with the motion. Say aye. Any noes? Any abstains? So motion of budget approved as amended, motion passes completely. So now we go to property tax levy discussion. So I will I want to confirm with everybody has had their discussion and there's no more discussion to be had. Oh,
So the $200,000 goes into the ending fund balance. Is that what I understand?
No, it's just built into the property tax projection for next year.
Yes. So, but in the budget that was presented, there was contingencies and ending fund balances that were built in to each fund balance or to each fund that was, I mean, we're also planning to, you know, for future happening that we change for this year. So on top of that, we're doing this for the budget, right?
Not sure I totally follow. So the 3% was included in the budget. If the committee chooses not to approve the 3% increase, we can just leave it as it is in the budget, and because it's a revenue, we can just kind of, it'll ebb and flow with it, and we have contingencies built in the general fund to cover that if we don't approve that levy. I think that's what you're asking.
Yep,
Okay.
that's what I'm asking.
I think the part that we're missing is if we didn't authorize that extra 200,000, then one of our ending fund balances at the end of the year is gonna be short $200,000 of what we have in this budget.
Got it. Okay. Yes.
That's right.
Okay. So I am open for a motion. Or I'll ask you to make a motion to approve the taxes for 2023-24 fiscal year of $2.8983 per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes.
So moved.
Can you read the number one more time?
Yes, $2.8983 per 1,000. So I have a motion.
A second.
All right. No further discussion since we already agreed that there's none. I will be here open
just a
for whoever wants to approve it, raise your hands or say yay. Okay, and anyone abstaining? Anyone no? So motion for property tax levy approved in unanimously. So with that, I think we conclude our budget committee meeting at 7:36 PM. So we'll adjourn.